Jai Baba. So today we have the privilege of having Micheal Lee Page with us. He's come from Australia after 7 years. Welcome back, Micheal, from all of us. And I'm sure most of you already know Micheal, but for the benefit of everyone, we would like to share a short introduction about him. So Micheal has been a blessed child. He met Baba first time when he was just 5 years old in Meherabad House, Sydney in 1956, followed by 1958 in Avtars aboard Queensland. And then he was here in Pune for the East and West Gathering 1962. Besides that, at a very early age, between 3 years to 7, he was also a companion to Francis Brabazon in establishing the Meherabad House in Sydney. So he has a lot of stories from his childhood, which he would be sharing with all of us. And besides that, I would also like to include that he's been also creating wonderful films and videos regarding Baba and spreading his word, his name, and his teachings all over the world. So welcome, Micheal. Please come and share your rich stories with all of us. Jai Baba.
Thank you, Raki, for that introduction. Remarkable memory. As Raki has said, I'm going to talk about my 3 meetings with Baba, share them with you, and again, just please feel free to ask any questions, make any comments. But I'm going to start by telling you about 2 heroes of mine. One of the tremendous benefits, pleasures of growing up in a Baba family was that I had wonderful role models and wonderful heroes. Of course, Baba being the greatest, naturally, but the Mandali as well, and also the people of my parents' generation. I looked up to them. They were just such fine people. And the 2 people I want to mention briefly, one of whom I never met in person, and the other being Francis Brabazon, as Raki mentioned. And the first person was a man named Baron von Frankenberg. And there's much I don't know about him, but just to give you a little bit of a sense of his life, I was born in 1951, in June 1951. He died in March 30th of 1950. But just to give you a sense of his life and why I call him a hero, was and there's lots of gaps in my knowledge of his history, but just to give you a sense of him, he was a German officer in the First World War, and caught in the horrors of the First World War. He, like Amrit's father Kumar, he made a bargain with God, and the bargain was that if God took him out of the First World War, he would serve God for the rest of his life. Now, at that stage, I don't know what that meant for the Baron. Interestingly to me, his parents got married in San Francisco in the USA, and he himself was born in Minneapolis, St. Paul in the US. But they got married in a Catholic church, makes you think he was Catholic. As far as I know, he only left one piece of writing, which was really a booklet rather than a book. I think it's only 32 pages in German, which I can't read at all. But it was a very idealistic, very humanitarian cry against the war and against the struggles of those times. So he made that bargain with God around about 1916, something like that, something in that range. I don't know the exact date. And the only reason I know this is because Francis Brabazon wrote about it in an autobiographical sketch that Francis, wrote, which included in part about the Baron. So the next thing that I can say about the Baron is that in 1925 and 1926, he was in Paris, France, at the Sufi school there in a suburb of Paris, attending a Sufi summer school, and this was being run by Hazrat Inayat Khan, who many of you will know his name. Hazrat Inayat Khan, I believe Baba said, was a fifth plane saint. He's considered the person who brought the Muhyiddin Chishti school of Sufism to the West, and he ran these summer schools. And then very early in 1927, Hazrat Inayat Khan set off on what was to be a brief journey to India to visit relatives or do what I don't even know the purpose of his trip, and the Baron set off for Australia. So around about January of 1927, the Baron set off for Australia. Hazrat Inayat Khan went to India. Hazrat Inayat Khan developed an illness in Delhi and died there in early 1927, and his tomb, his dargah, is there in Delhi. Apparently, I've never been there, but it's apparently a beautiful place. Has anyone been to it? Raki has. Yeah. Yes. You've been there also. Hazrat Inayat Khan's tomb. Yeah. The Baron set sail for Australia, and I have a copy of his passport, and I see that he landed in Perth, in Fremantle, Western Australia, in I think January 10th, 1927, something like that. Don't remember the exact date. And he then and I think this is a very heroic thing for the next, whatever 1927 is from 1950. Help me out here. How many years is that? 22, 23 years. He travelled, and you can follow this through looking at the Australian newspaper archives. He travelled around Australia to remote country towns and large cities, giving talks on Sufism and Sufi poetry, and I just think that's a remarkable thing. I can't tell you anything about those talks. I can't tell you anything about the numbers of people that attended, but he was doing what he promised God that he would do, which I think is heroic. This is Sufism from Inayat Khan. It's not Sufism as in Sufism reoriented. That comes from Inayat Khan's work, but at this point, the Baron knows nothing about Meher Baba. In around about 1940 in Melbourne, Francis Brabazon was directed to a meeting which was not attended or by the Baron, but it was oriented to Inayat Khan's Sufism. And then some weeks later, the Baron, who lived in Sydney, which is about 600 miles north of Melbourne, came to Melbourne, and Francis met him at his hotel, And Francis wrote in this autobiographical sketch I mentioned, he uses this beautiful phrase. He said he had the luster of love on his face. And Francis recognized him as not necessarily an advanced soul, but someone he clearly wanted to learn from. And Francis then essentially applied to be his apprentice, his student in Sufism. And Francis, as Micheal knows well, and she's written a beautiful play about this period of Francis's life, beautiful play about the Baron and Francis's relationship. Francis started living with him ostensibly as houseboy. I guess that was some kind of term that they thought was suitable for Francis's role. But Micheal and Ralph Brown have created this beautiful play, and one of the scenes is the Baron washing up the dinner dishes and Francis drying them. And while they're doing this, discussing Sufism, discussing spirituality, and it's a beautiful picture that Micheal and Ralph have captured. While Francis was living at the Baron's home in Western Sydney, the Baron received a package of books from Rabia Martin, who was the head of Sufism in the Americas and Oceania, was the title I think that she had. So she was the leader of Sufism in the Pacific and the USA. And this package of books were, I think, the 5-volume set of discourses. And Rabia wrote to the Baron and said, I take Meher Baba to be the Rasul, the Murshid of Murshids. I don't know the term that she used in her correspondence with the Baron. And so Francis and the Baron started this intensive study of Baba's discourses, and Rabia Martin, Murshida Rabia Martin, asked the Baron if he would accompany her to India. The plan was to go in, I think, 1948 to meet Meher Baba in person. And the Baron wrote back and said, given my age and my health, I recommend that you go with Francis Brabazon, take Francis Brabazon as your travelling companion and guardian and helper. And the Baron says, and he's very parsimonious, he's very good with saving money, which is absolutely true. In 1947, so Francis was, so the Baron pays for Francis to go to America to be with Rabia Martin and wait either for Baba to come to America or for Rabia Martin and Francis to go to America. In 1947, Rabia died of throat cancer. Just giving me a cue here. I believe she died of throat cancer. And so Francis then came back to Australia. Also in around about 1947, there was a beautiful letter, handwritten letter, signed by the Baron, sent to Baba, and I wish I had a copy to read it. It's beautifully written. And he the Baron says, I pledge myself and my murids, murid being the Sufi term for student of Sufism, I pledge myself and them, those who stay with me after Rabia Martin's death, I dedicate them to Meher Baba. And it's just, I'm not doing justice to the beautiful language that he uses, but it's a lovely handwritten letter, signed, of course, by the Baron. And the Baron then, in 1949, and as much as I can scour the records and newspaper clippings and archival material, I can't say this for sure, and nobody can, but it seems the only plausible explanation is that funds from the Baron came to Francis to allow him to purchase a block of land on the outskirts of Sydney, and which he did in February of 1949. And then Francis began hand building from stone quarried on the site the house that was to become Mayor House. It wasn't called Mayor House at that time. It was called Beacon Hill because that was the locality. But it's now known as Mayor House. And it's just a remarkable structure, a remarkable piece of work. Francis, he got a little bit of help from Mayor Barber followers on the weekends, but mostly this was his labour of love over 7 years. And I've described it, perhaps maybe a little fancifully, I don't know, of Francis's Kailash temple, because it's made from sandstone blocks that each block would be, I'll just use the imperial measures, 3 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. These are huge blocks of stone, and he handled them all by hand. He had no electric machinery, no other machinery. The only thing he did have sticks of dynamite, but he had a hand auger, so a drill to drill holes into the sandstone to put the dynamite into. But otherwise, it's just an extraordinary labour of love. So my family. So as far as I know, and I think it's a very reasonable guess, the Baron paid for the block of land and paid for the materials and for building Mayor House. He died, as I mentioned, in March 1950, and in early 1958, Francis purchased the land for Avatar's abode, which is 700 miles north of Sydney. And again, there's no documents that say this money came from the Baron, but almost certainly there was no other way to explain how could Francis, a poet, a writer, an artist, how could he have in those days, hundreds of dollars or pounds, but it couldn't be, there's no other explanation that I know of. So one of the things about building Mayor House that you may know already is that Francis had a belief that it wasn't the disciples or the students' place to invite the master to anything. And so Francis built this house, you could say, on spec. He built it, and he was very clear about this. He built it in the hope that Barber would come to Mayor House, would come to Sydney. But there was no guarantee. So he spent 7 years of hard labour building this house on a hope, a dream, a wish. But in 1954, middle of 1954, June 1954, my family, my father, Bill, my mother, Joan, and my 2 sisters, Marie and Jennifer, and I moved from Melbourne to Sydney, and we lived with Francis for the next 3 from 7 is 4, I think. It used to be. I did finish elementary school, Jeff, just to let you know, in case you were wondering. So Francis lived with my family until he left for India in January of 1959, where he was to stay with Barber as a close resident disciple, Mandali, until June of 1970. Is that right? No, June of 1969, sorry. Do you need more volume? Is it loud enough for... Can you hear okay? Okay, good. So Baba came to Sydney. Avatar's abode had not been dreamed of, or not dreamed of in our world. And Baba was coming to Australia for the first time, and he came in on 9th of August 1956. And by that stage, my family and I were living with Francis in Mayor House. We all moved out and left Mayor House to the Four Mandali and Baba and the Four Mandali, to occupy Mayor House from the 9th to the 14th of August 1956. My only direct memory of Baba in that time is sitting on the floor at his feet and somehow being drawn by him up to sit on the bed, which doubled as a sofa during the day, and being drawn to sit up on the bed with him. And he started playing a game with me. And this is a game, by the way, I was hoping Dara Irani would be here because Baba played the same game with him, but Dara wasn't able to come. Oh, it's Amrit's birthday, I think. That's right, Raki, yeah. But Baba drew me into this game where he would hold out his hand, and I just knew, from the context, from his expressions, perhaps Erich said something, I don't remember that, where the game was for me to hit Baba's hand, and Baba whip it away like that. And then, the roles would be reversed, and then Baba would be hitting my hand like this. And I could not hit his hand. And he would hit my hand every time, and I would keep missing. And I got very irritated with Baba. I felt intensely competitive and really grumpy about all of this. But I lost the game, and that was that. But it's a small insight into how natural I felt with Baba. I could join him on the bed, play this game with him, lose, get mad at him, and that was my experience as a 5-year-old. I remember other things about that event, but they're not directly of Baba. There are things that people have told me, I did this with Baba, I interacted with Baba, but I don't remember them. So I'll just pass over 1956. So the next time that Baba was to come to Australia was in 1958, and he came from June 3rd to June 6th of 1958. And the very first afternoon of his arrival, he arrived in late morning or around midday, and the very first meeting was a meeting that focused on obedience, and it was a series of grueling and grilling questions that Baba put to the Australian followers that were there about obeying him. Were they prepared to obey him? You've come here because you've agreed to obey me. Let's see how this holds up. So then the adults and the teenage children were asked a series of questions like, would you go to school naked? Would you throw your children in the ocean? I have no memory of that at all. One of the teenagers who were there is sure that I was there, Cynthia Adams, Trish. I don't remember it. I can't say anything more about that. People's descriptions of it are very touching. 2 teenagers and 1 adult said they couldn't obey Baba, and therefore they were required to leave, but Baba didn't enforce that. At the end of this apparently harrowing meeting, Baba had the prayer of repentance read out, and I believe he said, up to this moment, all of your, I don't think he used the word sins, but all of your errors of your way are eliminated. So you've got a fresh start. That's my paraphrasing of what was said. The next morning, which was June 4th, 1958, Baba asked, "Where are the children?" Referring to myself, my sister, another child, and probably other children as well. And we were being billeted on a nearby farmhouse. And Baba gestured for us to come. So we came into the hall at Avatar's abode. It's about half the size of this room, roughly speaking. And I sat down about halfway up the hallway amongst about 50 adults and children. And I see, and I look forward and I see a tableau, which is Baba in his chair. He'd now had the second accident. He had the severe hip injury. And he was in his chair a lot, and he was carried in his chair rather than walking or... he did walk, but was also carried in a chair with carry arms, whatever you call those. A sedan chair, did someone say? Whatever that device is called. And to his right was Adi, Nariman, and presumably Donkin, although I can't actually picture Donkin. I think partly because he was such a self-effacing person that I have no memory of Donkin, although I definitely remember Nariman and Adi. And then to Baba's left, Erich is standing there. And I see Baba turn towards Erich, and Erich lean down to read Baba's gestures, I guess. And I hear Erich say in a stage whisper, so I could actually hear it, "Baba, it's Michael's birthday." So it was my 7th birthday. So Baba gestures for me to come forward, and I came forward, and he embraced me. And I was telling Hunter and Bradley about that experience of being embraced by Baba. A lot of adults talk about the strength of Baba's embrace, and Amrit being one. You know, Amrit saw Baba at the time of her wedding in 1968, and she saw he looked so feeble and so ill, and then when he embraced her, he felt the strength of her. She felt the strength of his embrace. What I felt was nothing like strength at all. It was like being embraced by a cloud. It was so soft, so ephemeral in a way. That was the feeling, and it's just a sense of great softness, great gentleness. Just a cloud-like quality is the best word I can use to describe the embrace I got for my birthday on that day, the 4th of June. I went back to my seat, amongst the crowd, and at some point, and I don't remember the sequence, it's maybe recorded somewhere, I haven't seen it, Baba starts throwing prasad to people, as you know. And so, what's your name in the cream shirt? What is your name? Oh, Nikki, you'll do. Thanks, Nikki. Of course I know who you are. And your granddad is here, correct? Yeah. So Baba was throwing prasad to people, and I was probably sitting about the distance that Nikki is from me. And in front of me was a man named John Bruford. And those of you that went to Meherabad today may have noticed there are 2 beautiful busts of Baba, one in the blue bus and one in Baba's bedroom. The one in the blue bus I think is white, cream. Yeah, and then the one in the Baba's bedroom is a very dark grey, black. I actually didn't, sorry? But maybe brass now, yeah. So those were made by John Bruford, who was many things, an electronics engineer, a drawer, and a sculptor, as well as multitudes of other things, a perfectionist. And he reached in front of me and intercepted the prasad out of the air. I mean, it's quite a remarkable thing to do. Just to give a little more colour to the picture, John, who I knew all my life and admired tremendously, he'd had polio as a child, and he'd had polio and also I think a case of spina bifida, I'm not exactly sure, but he had a number of physical limitations, and yet he was able to move and do this very adroit thing and catch the prasad. Everybody laughed, and including Baba, and Baba gestured for me to come forward so that I'd be in front of John, and John wouldn't be able to intercept this again. So then Baba looks at me and just lobs the prasad gently through the air. He doesn't try and trick me. It's not like he's looking there and throwing this way. He's looking directly at me, throws the prasad. It hits my palm and bounces to the ground. And I can still see it bouncing to the ground. And Baba then sort of gestures like, how come this boy can't do this simple task? Because anyone could do this, 7 years old or not. So one of the people that was there, Bernard Bruford, some of you may know, he said, Tommy, just recently, he said, our hearts bled for you because it looked like a really embarrassing situation. How come this person can't do this simple task? Baba gets me to come a little further forward, maybe 3 or 4 feet further, a metre and a bit, throws the prasad gently, hits my hand, bounces to the ground, and Baba's gesturing with this, what I absolutely took as mock incredulity, like how come this person can't do this? This is so simple. And I'm thinking the same thing. And I was mildly embarrassed, mildly puzzled, curious, like what's going on here? Why can't I do this? And if you'd thrown me a pebble or a tennis ball or something, I could have caught it. It was not difficult to do. Baba's gesturing with sort of impatience and incredulity, but his eyes were twinkling. I could say like mad, like just so enjoying this, and that because I could see because I could see Baba's eyes twinkling, I didn't feel as embarrassed as other people apparently felt for me, which was a good thing. Come a little closer, because people in India, as you know well, gesture this way. They don't do this; they do this. And I'm pretty sure Baba did this. Come a little closer. Now I may be at Jeff, where Jeff's sitting. Again, gently lob through the air. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Jeff. Hope we got that on video. Same thing. Puzzled, frustrated, mildly embarrassed, but also knowing that this was a game that Baba was playing with me. Come a little closer. Now I'm maybe at the foot of the steps there. Gently lobs through the air, hits my hand, falls to the ground. Come a little closer. Now I'm about a metre away, 3 feet away. Same thing. Lobs gently into my hand, falls to the ground. And everyone, including Baba, is laughing, and there's a lot of merriment about it, although, potentially could have been quite traumatizing. And Baba then goes, the mock exasperation. I mean, I'm saying a mock. I don't think he was really exasperated. He has me come up, puts the prasad in my hand, and closes my fingers over it, and does that. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you a few other experiences that I had with Baba. They didn't change my relationship with Baba at all. They didn't deepen it. They didn't change it. They were just. Well, what I've done is I've described them as conundrums. Like, why did Baba put me through this? It could have been embarrassing. It could have been humiliating. It could have been frustrating. I could have felt like a failure. But I didn't, but to this day, I don't know why Barbara would put me through this. And there were a couple of other teenagers, maybe one adult, and I don't remember who. I don't know because I've heard, but I wasn't the only one that couldn't catch the prasad. But Barbara had emphasised the importance of catching the prasad and how it made a link with him. I forgot, I'm going to go back, I forgot an important part of the story, which was shortly before Barbara came to Australia for the first time in 1956, Francis had told me two things. Francis Brabazon had told me two things. One was the concept of the avatar, that God takes human form from time to time, and the other was the concept of reincarnation. And as a 5-year-old at the time, they just went straight into my consciousness, my mind, I don't know what, and I just like, yep, that makes good sense to me. I accept that. And so my relationship with Barbara has always been one of acceptance. What I do with it is a different matter, but that Barbara is the avatar, that the avatar takes form periodically, and that we do reincarnate. I've just accepted as, yep, that's true. I get that. I believe that. And so my relationship, so nothing that I experienced with Barbara or between my meetings with him didn't change my belief. That just it was there. It was solid. It was that's how it was. But so just going back to this prasad, my inability to catch the prasad. I told this story in Myrtle Beach, the first time I went there in 1979, the Meherabad Centre in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where Jeff and Nan and lots of other people work, maybe, I don't know. And Lynn Ott was there. We were just in a small room, a small kitchen. And I told the story of not being able to catch the prasad. And Lynn Ott, who's the painter, who did the painting of, when you were at Meherabad today, the painting that's immediately on your left when you come in the doors to Meherabad Mandali Hall, and there's a painting in a circular shape, primarily yellows, I think, Trish, yellows and other colours. Lynn said that he thought that this experience that I had represented Barbara drawing me closer through successive incarnations. Of course, I have no idea whether that's true or not, but it's an appealing idea to me, and it certainly fits the fact that I feel like I didn't have to do any work to believe in Barbara. I didn't have to struggle. It came immediate and stayed with me. So there was no. I feel it was him doing the work, not me. It's always been my feeling. So that was that. And now I don't know if there was the next day or the same day. Barbara gestures for me to stand up. And so I'm standing in the middle of a room about this size with a similar number of people, maybe more children. And Barbara asks me, who do you love best? Mummy, Daddy, or Barbara? And I went, oh my goodness. And so I thought about my mother and her good qualities, and then I thought about her more challenging qualities, and then I thought about my father and his good qualities and less appealing qualities. I went back to my mother, did a sort of tally of good and bad points, went back to my father, again the same thing. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me, Barbara wants me to say, I love him the best. So I just said, I looked at Barbara and I said, Barbara. Now, and Barbara gave this beautiful, beaming, embracing smile. It was totally ingenuous on my part. I didn't know what it meant to love Barbara. I'd never had the thought about loving or not loving him. I just knew that was the right answer in the moment. But Barbara responded, like I'd said, the most spontaneous and heartfelt thing imaginable it was at a conscious level, absolutely not. And that's another thing, you know, when I've told this story to people outside of the Barber communities around the world, they say, well, that's cruel, that's harsh, you know, how would that be for a child? But I was mildly, you know, I felt on the spot, but it was bearable, it was tolerable. It was more than bearable and tolerable. But it's a conundrum. Like, why did Barber want me to answer? The answer was not, at least at a conscious level, it was not genuine. Again, why would Barber have wanted me to be in that position? I don't have an answer. Suggestions welcome. We'll have a suggestion box up here. Also, going back to 1956 for a moment, the two events, the three meetings I had with Barber had a tremendous sense of it being a carnival, of being a really enjoyable time. It's so colourful and so delightful, and just the vibe was very, very positive. But in 1956, as a 5-year-old, I looked behind me, and across the street and up on a rock shelf were my playmates, my 5-year-old friends. There was 8 or 10 of them sitting in a line looking at this person in a white robe, a pink jacket, all of these other, 50 or so people. And I thought, uh-oh, here's trouble. And there was. And so, as I've shared, as my close friend Cynthia Adams, a little older than me, have shared, our world with Barber was very safe, very secure, very loving, just a wonderful experience. And the outside world was tough. I found out later, I mentioned this just a few days ago, I found out that that someone in the neighbourhood, a neighbour, whose sons I played with almost every day, had burnt Barber's books as a sort of, a protest against, these non-Christian ideas being brought into the neighbourhood. And other boys, and boys also teased me about Barber, because it's a very unusual sight in any in the 1950s in Australia or the US or any Western country. It wouldn't, you can imagine how unusual it was. My solution was to beat them up. And I was good at it. I never threw any punches, but for some reason I was good at wrestling. And I found it really easy to wrestle people to the ground. And that stopped. That particular neighbour would stop doing it. So then, I think those are the main things. I mean, I have memories of Nariman. I have memories of Adi. As I said, I have no memories of Dr. Donkin at all. Although, the record shows that he was there, but I didn't. I have no memory of him. I remember Barber driving away to the Brisbane airport. I didn't feel, I felt maybe a little bit of sadness, but not much, just a slight feeling of sadness. I still remember the Mundley and Barber and the luggage being packed into this small Fiat, a small Italian sedan. It was like a circus act. You know how they try to fit X number of clowns into a car. It had that sort of vibe to it. It's like everyone being jumbled around and squashed in, and they set off. One thing I mentioned about John Bruford, the sculptor who intercepted the Prasad, and who did the 2 busts of Barber. He was a perfectionist, and he and I had long conversations about sculpting Barber and drawing Barber. He was He was an electronics engineer. I think he held a couple of patents for particular devices used in telecommunications. He had, when he knew that Baba was coming back to Australia, he was given the task, or took on the task, of getting a car for Baba to be driven in. And the Baron's car had been used in 1956, and it was getting old and unreliable. So John Bruford decided on a particular model car. Who was asking me about the DeSoto at Meherabad? Someone asked me today about whether that was the same model as Baba was driven in. No, he was driven. Where's Jean? Is Jean still here? Okay. What John Bruford chose was a French car, a Peugeot, the model 403. John Bruford buys the car, but he buys it from a factory in Sydney because he heard the quality was better than the factory in Melbourne. And then he gets his mechanic to strip the engine down. It's a brand new car, mind you, but John was taking no chances. He stripped the car down, had it rebuilt, fitted a heater because there was no heater in the car in that particular model in that particular year. And knowing it was winter, because June, July, August are the coldest months anywhere in Australia. And John essentially rebuilt this brand new car to have it just so for Baba. Just to mention that as an example of John's perfectionism, which Raki mentioned that I've done made a lot of videos of Baba, and a lot of them involve using stills in various ways. If you're a video maker, you know how you can zoom in and you can do motion paths and so on. And one of the things that John emphasised with me is it's really important not to tilt Baba's image, because as soon as you tilt a face, you change the structure of it. If I lean forward, the structure of my face changes. So not tilting. Make sure that if there's a vertical, make sure you have a vertical straight. If you have a horizontal line, make sure it's horizontal. And John was felt very strongly. I mean, it was, what's the word? He wouldn't debate this. You should never flip Baba's photo. So if Baba's image is like that, and you have the negative or a slide, never reverse it, because it's no longer Baba as we see him. And I know that to be true. And so John, that's an example of John's perfectionism and the importance of that. And I'm just passing on it because it's so important. A couple of clues. I think in the East and the West, men's shirts button left over right, and women's shirts button right over left. That's all well and good. That's reasonably easy to spot. But then you get Baba wearing Elizabeth's coat. And then you've got to be on your toes. But anyway, for those of you that don't know this already, just take John's words to heart, because when you flip Baba's image, it doesn't look like Baba to me. I mean, it's obvious it doesn't look like Baba. And if you have a transparency against a window, take that into account, because if you flip that, if you look at a transparency from the other side, you get a reversed image. So that's John Bruford's wisdom, passing on for those of you who don't know. Do you do videos, Nikki? I think. Basic videos, yeah. Okay. So in 1962, oh my goodness. In 1962, we were invited to go to the East-West Gathering. And a few people went by plane. It was super expensive in those days, as you can imagine. And the rest of us went by ship, which was much more economical, but of course much slower. And I'll just skim through a couple of things. A couple of things on the trip were quite impactful for me. One was there was lots of children of my age on the ship. Some of them were Australian, some of them were English people, either going back to England after deciding Australia was not the country for them, or going back for a holiday. I don't know which. But a boy who was maybe a couple of years older than me and a head taller than me started picking on me. I don't know what he did, maybe poking me or punching me or something. But, you know, trying to get a reaction out of me, or trying to dominate me or whatever. I don't know what his purpose was. And I put up with it for a while, and I thought, no, this is just going to go on. So I grabbed him and I threw him on the deck. And then I thought, what am I going to do next? If I let him get up, he'll just keep doing this annoying thing. So I decided I would put my knees on his arms. So I was sitting on his chest with my knees on his arms, so he could no longer hit me because his arms were pinned down. And then as I'm sitting there and I'm encircled by 20 or 30 children about my age, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, what can I, you know, what am I going to do? Realizing, again, even though I'd pinned his arms, once I got off his chest and released his arms, the whole thing would start again. And then I remembered where I was going, and I had the thought, what would Barbara think of me doing this? I'm not saying it's a right thought or a wrong thought, that was just my thought. Barbara would not like this, for me to be in this physical fight. And I burst into tears thinking about this, and my tears flooded his shirt. I'm sitting on his chest with tears pouring down onto his shirt, and all the children, the 30 or so children, are like, "What's going on here? Here's the person that's just won the fight," and he's sobbing his heart out. But I got up and, you know, released him, and he didn't continue picking on me ever for the rest of the voyage. But when I came back to Australia, I went from primary or elementary school to high school, and my reputation preceded me. So boys would pick fights with me just to test themselves. I could not fight back. It wasn't a philosophical feeling, it wasn't a decision. I just couldn't fight. And so that was the last physical fight I ever had. And I think people got sick of this person who would just, you know, give up immediately. The other thing that happened on the ship, which to this day, and I don't know what, you know, I don't know that Barbara would necessarily have disapproved of what I did, but that was the feeling. He wouldn't have liked it. The other thing that happened is in Sri Lanka, in Colombo, a well-known magician came on board, and just very briefly, he took a mango seed, put it in a bucket of soil on the solid ship deck, and had a cloth over it, and within a space of about 10 minutes, he grew a mango sapling that was about 1 metre high. And it was a most remarkable thing. And those of us that are still living, that were on that voyage, we still talk about it. Some of them are convinced that it was sleight of hand, that it was a magic trick, and some of it, and I think it wasn't. I was 11, you know, but I'm to this day, I believe it was something else. He pulls the sapling out. If you crush a mango leaf, as you may know, it smells like a mango fruit, and this did, and you could see the roots coming out of the seed, the mango seed. When Francis came back from India in 1969, I told him this story, and he said, "Oh yes, there are families." Francis said, yeah, there are families in India that have mantras to make mango seeds grow into saplings. There are families that have mantras to make the rainfall. There are families that have mantras to make whatever. And he said those mantras are guarded jealously, generation to generation to generation. I don't know if other people have had that experience, but it was my first experience of the physical world is not all there is. So it was, that gave me the first sense of, don't believe your eyes always. Don't always believe your eyes. Don't always believe what's in front of you. We arrived at Guru Prasad. I'll leave out the details of comings and goings. We arrived at Guru Prasad, and on the afternoon of the second day, so we missed the entire first day and we missed the morning session of the second day. So our first contact with Baba was on the afternoon of the second day. And we came, the Australian group that came by ship, the reasons why we were delayed, and it was because of the China-India skirmish at that time, more than skirmish, war. They cancelled our domestic, what's the word for non-military? Non-military use of planes. We had to continue by ship rather than taking a plane from Colombo. We came up on stage. I don't remember my mother Joan, my father Bill, my two sisters. I don't remember the order, but we came up on Baba's. I don't know my left from my right. On Baba's left. Thank you, Jeff. It's a good thing Jeff's heard this story a dozen times. And as I approached Baba, he was seated on the dais. I started to lean forward to embrace him, and I would be putting my head on his left shoulder. Correct, Jeff? Thank you. But as I bent forward, I saw a golden effulgence around Baba. It went from his shoulders around his head in a circular shape. For those of you that know Giotto's paintings from the Renaissance, that was the shape. Of course, those are done in gold leaf, so they're solid. But in this case, in Baba, with what I saw with Baba, the halo, I guess, is maybe the best word. Maybe not the best word. It was gold. It had a firm boundary, but it was shimmering. So the whole halo was shimmering. And then I put my head on his shoulder, and we embraced. And then when I straightened up, it wasn't there, and that was the one and only time I had that experience. But in 2015, I was in Mandalay Hall with Meherabad Jessawala, who everyone I think knows who that is, the brother of Erich Jessawala, one of Baba's Mandalay. And I don't remember why, maybe it was just in the spirit of sharing, I shared this experience with Meherabad Jessawala. This is just, he died in June of 2016, June? 2016, thank you. So I told him the story, just sitting out on the veranda, out from Mandalay Hall, Meherabad Mandalay Hall, and he said, perhaps with the slightest of sighs, I should say, he said, yes, children are allowed to see such things. Yeah. And that was his comment. That's what he said, definitely, they were his words. Children are allowed to see, yes, children are allowed to see such things. The sigh, I don't know if he was remembering something that he'd experienced, or I don't know. If he sighed, and it was so subtle I could barely, I think he sighed, but he said that. So then we we came back down on off the dais and sat amongst the East-West gathering, and then we had 2 more days of the East-West gathering, the 3rd day and the 4th day. I'm conscious of the time, so I'll just the morning sessions were curious to me because, and I've said this to several people on this visit, they were so ordinary. How did you sleep? How's the hotel? How's the food? It was like such ordinary conversation. And as an 11-year-old, I'm sitting there, we're sitting with the Avatar, we're sitting with the Christ. I don't know if I use the word Christ, but we're sitting with God in human form, and he's asking, Sam, how's your health? And just the most ordinary questions. There was nothing profound, there was nothing grand. By this stage, by 11, I was fairly self-conscious and really wanting to obey the rules and, be a good child and not cause any fuss. However, I was very envious, moderately envious, to very envious of Wendy and Charles Haynes. Wendy would drape herself over Barbara's chair, and Charles would be, right up close to Barbara. And, I did not have the nerve to do any of things like that. So I was just, I sat there trying to think up jokes I could tell Barbara just to entertain him, which I'll skip over because they're too embarrassing to repeat. And then I'll guess the last morning, it might have been the second last morning, it might have been the last morning, the Westerners, because the morning sessions were for the Westerners and the afternoon sessions, as you probably know, were for the East and the West. The morning sessions were, does anyone know, less than 100 people, and the afternoon sessions were thousands. I don't know the numbers, sorry. So someone asked Barbara, or maybe it was prearranged, for us all to come out of Guru Prasad, the Westerners, and sit in a semicircle around Barbara for a photo opportunity of movies and still cameras. And there's beautiful footage of that. I imagine everyone's seen them. Just high quality color movie and color photos, and some black and white photos. And you'll see me sitting at Barbara's feet, sitting cross-legged at Barbara's feet in my shorts and my shirt, probably not unlike this one. And for years, I thought, for a child who had become so self-conscious and so concerned with doing the right thing and being polite, like how come I was sitting at Barbara's feet? Because I was really 18 inches from his feet. And then some 20 years ago in the old Pilgrim Centre, I saw film footage from this period, and what I see is Erich put what looked like a giant hand on my back and shove me 3 to 4 meters across this open area to sit at Barbara's feet. So Erich was the one that forced me to sit at Barbara's feet. I never got a chance to ask him. I don't think I saw the film until after Erich had passed, and I don't even know that I would have asked him really what he was doing. I doubt that he would have remembered, but anyway, he pushed me and sat at Barbara's feet. So you in the movies that exist, you see me sitting at Barbara's feet, and now I have another conundrum, which is usually if you're in a photo opportunity, you look at the camera, and but I'm thinking to myself, Barbara's the real subject here. We're incidental, and so I'm looking at the camera. No, I'm looking up at Barbara, and then I'm looking out at the camera, looking up at Barbara, and you see me just pondering this. Should I be looking at Barbara? Should I be looking at the camera? So you see me swivel my head back and forth a few times. The photo opportunity was over, I don't know, 15 minutes, maybe 20 at the most. That's my sense of it. The accounts may say differently, but it seemed like quite quick. So then we all stood up to leave, I guess to go back into Guru Prasad. And at that moment, I'm standing face to face with Baba, 18 inches away from him. And the first thing I notice is I don't have to look up very far to look into his face. And then I realize, oh, Baba's not as tall as I thought he was. Because as an 11-year-old, I only had to look up a little bit to look into Baba's face. And as I say, that surprised me. The next thought I had was, I've been really well behaved all this time. I've made no demands on Baba. I've made no demands on anyone. And now I want a moment of special attention from Baba. So I stand in front of him, willing with all the willpower that a 11-year-old can muster, willing Baba to look at me. And so I'm standing there going, pay attention to me, look at me, give me a sign. I don't know if I said give me a sign, but like willing Baba to make direct contact with me. Baba's eyes flash. Sorry, video person. Baba's eyes flash to the left. His eyes flash to the right. His eyes flash to the left. He never looks me in the eye. He never meets my gaze. And I tried my damnedest to make this happen. And it didn't happen. And I was a bit, not a bit, I was disappointed. I was aggrieved. I was grumpy. I was not happy about this. It's like, this is a little thing to ask. But it didn't happen. And there's two things that follow from this. One is something I just learnt this year. I was telling this story to 3 people in Myrtle Beach, near the Baba Centre. And one of them said, hold on a sec, that's not true. She pulled out her phone. This is Dee Dee Mavris, who some of you know. Dee Dee's mother, Julia Mavris, was at the East-West Gathering. And because Julia, who I didn't know and never met as far as I know, except for the East-West Gathering, Julia and I, the mother, in her mid-40s at this stage perhaps, and I were sitting close together. And because of that, Dee Dee, her daughter, had this the photograph of me with Baba and with Julia. And she said, look at this photograph. Baba's looking directly at you. I've just got my head turned away. So that's the latest version of this truth, of this story. But so we then went back to back into Guru Prasad, and then in the afternoon back to the afternoon session. And I mean, I wasn't heartbroken, but I wasn't happy about this. The next day, or maybe the day after, I don't know. I could find out, but I didn't do the research to work it out. The Australian group were to go on a bus trip to Mahabaleshwar from Pune, because we had to fill in time before the ship left to go back to Australia. And in the morning, my mother decided that I wasn't well enough to go on this bus trip. I had the mildest whatever, sniffle, upset stomach, I don't know what it was like. And I'm going, well, I could, this is no big deal. Sit on a bus, I can do that. But I just went along with what she wanted, which was I didn't go on this bus trip. So in the morning, and this I now hear from Bao, in the morning, Baba's meeting with the men Mandali, and Erich has a clipboard, and Baba's gesturing to Erich. So who went on the bus trip to Mahabaleshwar? Did Anthony Thorpe go? Yes, Baba. Did Reg Paffel go? Yes, Baba. Did Joan Bruford go? Yes, Baba. Did Bill LePage go? Yes, Baba. Did Michael LePage go? Erich says, no, he stayed back in the hotel with his mother because he's not well. And Bao tells me, Baba said, look at the love of the mother for the child. Now, I know my mother well. She wouldn't have given a damn about a sightseeing trip, but that was what Barbara said. So my mother and I are back at the Wellesley Hotel, famous for limp cornflakes and warm buffalo milk. I don't recommend it. 2 stars on TripAdvisor. No disrespect for Indian culture. Does someone have a question? No. So my mother and I are back at this hotel. I don't know if anyone went to the Wellesley Hotel. It was grey. The curtains were grey. The walls were grey. Everything was full of dust. It would have been a charming hotel back a century ago, but it had seen better days. But you know, who cares? Barbara's car arrives at the hotel, and Barbara has sent for my mother and I to come. And so we go to Guru Prasad in Barbara's car. My guess is it is that blue DeSoto that's now at Meherabad. That's my impression, that it was a mid-blue car. I could easily be wrong, but that's my impression. So we arrive at Guru Prasad. We go into that same room. It's the first room you come to on your right-hand side when you go into the main entrance of Guru Prasad. And I think it's seen as, it's referred to as the Mandali's room, where the men Mandali would work with Barbara. So I go into the room. My mother, I think, was behind me, but by chance. And I sat down cross-legged at Barbara's feet, about like if I was on that step, about 5 feet from Jeff. And the first thing that happens is a pretty girl on the far left-hand side against the wall, an Indian girl, is there with her family, parents, and what looked like a younger brother. And I thought that I was attracted to her prettiness. So that's where my mind went. I looked at Barbara, but my mind was over there. And Barbara said, "What are you thinking?" And I thought, oh my goodness. But I had heard stories of the Mandali, of, for example, Adi being put on the same spot by Barbara. And he would say, "Nothing, Barbara." And I don't remember what happened to Adi, but I said, "Nothing, Barbara," and he let it drop. He didn't pursue it. And so I sat in front of Barbara. I don't remember much of what happened. I felt very comfortable, apart from being put on the spot. That soon passed. And he asked me again, "Who do you love best, Mummy or Barbara?" Because Bill, my father, had gone to Mahabaleshwar, so only my mother was there. And this time, of course, I was well rehearsed in the art of lying. So I said Barbara. And Erich, according to my mother, Erich then of his own accord, not interpreting Barbara's gestures, he leans forward and says, "Mummy, you've lost out again." So that's all I really remember from that time. And last anecdote, because I've gone over time, as is my usual way. We gathered, and I've got to tell you one other quick story. We came here on a day trip to Meherabad, and we went upstairs to Barbara's bedroom. Now, I don't know whether Barbara was using the upstairs bedroom in 1962. Does anyone know? No. Was not? Not. Okay. So we went upstairs to see what had been Barbara's bedroom, which was interesting. I didn't remember anything much about it, but I remember where it was, and I remember going into it. And then to my left, I saw this window. And I saw it opened onto a tiled roof. And I saw beyond the tiled roof, there was a tree. And I thought, this is a great way to get down from this building. So I climbed out the window, climbed carefully across the red tiled roof, saw this tall, not tall, but slender, straight tree. I remember it being very straight. And so I climbed onto it, slid to the ground, and there at the bottom was Kitty Davey. I don't remember her words, but I remember the sternness. It was like, this is not fitting, this is not becoming, this is not right for you to do this. So that was my scolding by Kitty Davey. I was looking today to see if I could identify the tree. There is one tree that is straight and close enough to the roof that you could reach out and catch it, but it's a palm tree, so it's quite knobbly. So I don't know if that was the actual tree or whether it's been replaced. But I remember it being a straight and slender tree. Last story. The day comes when Baba is due to go back to Meherabad from Pune, and we all gather around under the mango tree. Is that right? Mango tree or banyan tree? Mango, under the mango tree. And again, I thought to myself, I've been really well behaved all this time. I've not imposed on anyone. I should say, years and years and years later, it suddenly occurred to me that Baba had granted my wish of special attention a day or two later. So I forgot to mention, just to spell that out. Because I never thought about it for 50 years. And then I thought, I see, maybe that's what it was. Because I wasn't sick. It was like, it didn't make sense until now, maybe. So I burrowed, thinking how well behaved I'd been all these days, I then burrowed and shoved and elbowed my way through and found myself at Baba's, not at his feet, but within a metre or a metre and a half of him. And I think that prayers were said, arti was sung. I don't remember any of that, that's just what I've read. But then we all stood up and we walked very slowly, one step after another step after another step to Baba's waiting car. A distance of about 10 metres, roughly, 30 feet, maybe a bit less. And I was walking with everyone, maybe 2 metres from Baba, and I found myself at the rear bumper bar of the car. In my mind, it was a black car. The descriptions that I read are not of a black car, they're of a blue car, so I don't really... My memory is of a black car. And I stood there as Baba was helped into the car, and I knew intuitively that I would not see him again. I didn't know the word intuitive, but I knew I wasn't going to see him again. And that's the truth, not in his physical form. Thanks, everyone. Sorry to keep you late. Who's got some really tricky questions? 1 minute. Yes, Ron. Yep.
But his son came to America.
Yep.
Found in the abode of the message.
Yep.
In Connecticut. Do you have any insight into that whole process after she deceased, the woman who had throat cancer died?
Yeah. Rabia Martin, yes. Ron, that is a long story, too long for the moment, but I will add one more thing, which is Inayat Khan's eldest son, Vilayat Khan, came to Meherabad and met Baba. Yeah, that's about all otherwise, I do know bits and pieces, but I couldn't summarize it. But that ongoing contact was there with Vilayat. Vilayat Khan's youngest daughter was killed by the Germans as a spy in the French resistance. So that's a whole other extraordinary story. Trish.
Can you express how you felt about that? How you felt in your, express your, how you felt emotionally, lovingly? I know that's probably a tough one.
That's incredibly tough.
Repeat the question.
Just how did you feel about Baba? Like, yeah.
Mm.
his heart?
Yeah.
Was he like a grandfather? Was he like God to you?
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's a great question, and I don't have a clear answer. But I would say that when people say to cover themselves, they say, "Oh, he's my uncle or he's my grandfather." I didn't feel he was an uncle or a grandfather. I think I always knew the grandeur of what Baba was at any and every age. So I was interviewed by a journalist, an Indian journalist. Some of you may know Rusbeh Barucha.
Yeah.
Is that right? He asked me. He said, "When did you fall in love with Baba?" I said, and I mean this with complete seriousness, I aspire to fall in love with Baba. It hasn't happened. So that his ministry, his messages are extraordinary. I'm often stunned by the truth of what Baba reveals to us. But I can't say that I feel moments of love. I can't say that it's a constant state.
So when you were young?
Even when I was young, I think I just naturally picked up on the reverence of people that I admired, the reverence they had for Baba. And because I admired them and respected them and revered them, like John Bruford, it was very easy for me to transfer that to Baba and just accept their acceptance of Baba really as my own. Sorry, Trish, that's about all I can do for the moment. Okay.
So in 1969, when Baba dropped his physical body,
Yep.
after that, how did you feel? In terms of that, you won't be again seeing him physically.
Yep.
So when you learned that Baba dropped
Yep.
his physical body,
Yep. Great question.
what went inside?
Yep. How are we doing time-wise? Do we have another 5 minutes?
We're almost 6, but that's fine.
Okay. So I was at Mayor House at home. The black Bakelite telephone, rotary telephone. Do you ever seen one?
Yeah.
Just checking. It rang, and I picked it up, and it was the local postmaster. And he said, "I have a telegram." So he said, "Avatar Meher Baba dropped his physical body at 12 noon today to live eternally in the hearts of his lovers everywhere." You know that. I don't. Is it 12 or 12:15? Either 12. 12:15. So my first thought was, how's my father going to take this? My second thought was, how's my mother going to take this? And I didn't have a strong emotional reaction. I did have the thought that I was 17. I had the thought that I wanted to go to India, to be here. But then I thought, I'm a school kid, I haven't got a passport, haven't got $1. And so I dismissed it. So I just had that, that fleeting thought, I'd like to come to India to be here. Where that came from, I don't know. I didn't act on it. May not have even been legally possible as a 17-year-old to travel on my own. I don't know about that. But I didn't and generally don't feel a loss of Baba's physical presence. I feel, even today at Meherabad, I felt Erich's absence. I feel the absence of the mandali. I feel the absence of my mother. But I don't feel Baba's physical absence. Yeah, so hope that's it. Yeah, you're most welcome. Yes, Debjani. Is it Debjani? Down there?
Did Baba ever give you any order?
Yes. One of which I choose not to talk about because that was involved in the order. And even the fact that the way my mother explained it, even the fact that I and other people were given certain orders, we were told not to talk about it. My mother explained it as being it would make other people envious, or it would make them unhappy. There were orders for example, in the mid 60s, we were to say the 3 prayers once a day for some months. Does anyone remember? No. So there were general orders like that. Silence Day, I observe to this day. You know, Baba didn't say continue to observe Silence Day. Mani proposed that we should. Baba's sister. Yeah, so there were a few things like that. The worst order was we were asked to write to Baba. And I was telling someone just a few days ago, if you think about for a moment about writing to someone who knows everything, it's like, what on earth do you write about? So, and I think I mentioned that Larry Karash, who's about my age, had the same thought. It's like, oh my goodness, what can you write to someone who knows everything? And I just procrastinated on it for weeks and weeks and weeks, maybe months, until another message came from Baba. Where's your letter? Not so abruptly, of course, but you know. And I remember getting special pink paper and writing. So what I opted for, I was about 14, I think, 13, 14, something like that. I opted to write him a story about a cricket match I'd participated in, thinking that would be entertaining for him. To my shock, Money, what do you say? Put it in the next family letter. She doesn't identify me. She only identifies me as a youngster. But that order to write a letter, I found it incredibly hard. My mother equally found it incredibly hard. And she was as slow or as late as me in doing it. Yeah. Jeff.
Any practices that you have in remembering Baba or keeping him with you?
Niha, is that right?
Here. Oh.
Sorry, is it Niha?
Neha.
I'm practicing your name. Jeff Baba. Sorry, Jeff.
Are there any practices that you have in remembering Baba, bringing them into your day that you feel comfortable about sharing?
You know, I'm a Gemini, so whatever I do, it changes. It changes a few weeks or a few months later. So yeah, I've had a series of things. Usually things I've picked up from the Mandali, like everything I thought and said and did today, I entrust to you. You know, that's something that I heard from Erich. Everything I will think and say and do today, I entrust to you. You know, I do that for months, and then, you know, then something, so then there'll be a change. So there's nothing that, I don't say the prayers every day. I admire people that do. I kind of envy them that they can do that, but I've never been able to do anything forever. So, yeah. So it would just things like that. Little phrases I picked up from Baba or from the Mandali, and I'd make them my mantra for however long it was going to last, and then there'd be something new. Yeah, that's all that comes to mind. It's after 6 o'clock. Raki, what? I'm happy to continue.
We are almost 6:05. So
6:05. Yep.
Yeah. So should we close today's session? Any last questions?
Meaning of life. That's the easy one.
Yes.
Raki, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'm sure everybody just loved and enjoyed the very heartwarming stories you've shared. And I wish I was also a child and I could be with Baba and see the golden halo around him. The children have that opportunity, right? And you were the fortunate one. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. And I just want to add, because when you said Inayat Khan's Dargah, people I think so have visited Nizamuddin Dargah in Delhi. And Inayat Khan's Dargah is right next to it, opposite the Oberoi's Hotel. So next time when you are there in Delhi, do go to Inayat Khan's Dargah. It's very quiet. And the beauty of that place is that the prayers which are written, they are engraved on the marble. The words are exactly like the Parvardigar prayer which we have of Baba. Most of the words over there of the prayer from Inayat Khan are the same.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone.
Thank you,
Jai
Raki.
Meher Baba. Jai Baba.